I thought drawing portraits was the safest job in Seoul. You smile, you sketch, collect your 15,001 and move on. Then one rainy afternoon, this stubborn, bright little girl sat down on my stool.
Can you draw people?
I try.
Good. Then draw me.
Don't you want to ask how much it costs first?
My dad always pays.
Must be nice.
Don't make my cheeks too round.
So you've done this before?
I've had lots of pictures taken,
Oh.
but nobody's ever drawn me before. My tutor is boring, my driver is asleep in the Mercedes down the block, and I have my own allowance.
In a city where everyone else treated me like a nobody, she was the first person to give me a reason to hope. I just thought I was drawing a kid. I had no idea that single stroke of charcoal was about to change my entire life. By 6 a.m., the morning shift at the Manhwa Cafe near Hongdae usually starts mopping. That was my cue to pack up my backpack, wipe the charcoal dust off my knuckles, and move out before anyone could ask if I'd stayed the night again. My days were built on sheer momentum. Noon was delivering food on a cheap bicycle with a chain that kept slipping. By 3 p.m. I'd set up a folding stool near the Han River, trying to convince tourists to pay 15,000 for a charcoal portrait. Most people walked right past without looking. It was raining lightly on Tuesday when a kid in yellow boots walked up and stopped right in front of my easel. "Draw me," she said. "Make it look real." She was wearing an oversized yellow raincoat and had this stubborn, impatient look on her face. "All right," I said, pulling out a fresh sheet. "Sit still." While I worked, she didn't shut up for a second. She talked about her school, some bird she saw on a light pole, and how her dad's friends were always on their phones. For 20 minutes I actually forgot how cold my feet were. I caught a faint mark near her hairline under her bangs, just a tiny shad, and sketched it in without thinking much about it. Then 2 guys in black suits came jogging down the river path, looking panicked. Miss Soo-jin, behind them, a dark sedan pulled up onto the curb. A tall man in a navy suit got out. He looked exhausted, but the second he saw her, he let out a long breath. "Soo-jin, what did I tell you about wandering off?" "Sorry, Dad," she mumbled, looking down at her boots. He pulled out a wallet to pay me, but as he grabbed the paper from my hands, his eyes locked onto the drawing. His thumb stopped right over the mark near her hairline. He didn't say anything for 5 full seconds. He just stared at the charcoal lines, his jaw tight. Then he folded the paper carefully, handed a stack of cash to one of his men, and looked at me once. "Keep an eye on this spot," he told his security guard. He ushered his daughter into the back seat and the car drove off. I sat there in the rain holding 200,000 in bills, staring at the empty street. I thought that was the end of it. Guys who drive 200 million cars don't usually come back to look for street artists. But 2 days later, around dusk, the same car pulled up by the riverbank. He got out alone this time. No guards, no flashing hazard lights. Just a tired-looking guy in an expensive coat walking up to my stool while I was packing my charcoal into my bag. He took my drawing out of his inner coat pocket and held it next to an old, creased photograph in his palm. The photo showed a woman with quiet eyes and the exact same faint line near her temple. "Her name was Yuna," he said softly. "My ex-wife." I stopped zipping my bag. "Okay, 4 years ago we got a divorce," he said, staring down at the photo. "My business, it's not safe. Things got bad and she left Seoul to keep away from it. Soo-jin stayed with me. That mark on her hairline is from a car crash the night Yuna packed her bags." He rubbed his forehead, looking away toward the water. "Soo-jin was 5. She doesn't talk about her mother. She doesn't even say her name anymore. But somehow you put that mark in the drawing." "I just drew what I saw," I said quietly. He looked down at my worn-out sneakers and my beat-up bicycle resting against the railing. He didn't look down on me, he just looked observant. "Soo-jin won't stop talking about you," he said. "She says you actually listen to her." He reached into his pocket and held out a plastic keycard. "An annex studio near the house. It's quiet, it's dry, and nobody bothers you there. Stay there. Teach my daughter how to paint and stop sleeping in 24-hour cafes." Room was bigger than my entire home back in high school. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows letting in the afternoon light, and a brand new set of oil paints on a desk. After 3 years of sleeping on booth cushions with my helmet under my head, standing on a soft rug felt bizarre. A quiet knock came from the door frame. Soo-jin was standing there, hugging a sketchbook against her chest. She looked small without her bright raincoat. "You staying?" she asked. "Looks like it," I said, setting my backpack down on a chair. "Your dad set all this up." She walked in slowly and sat down cross-legged right on the floor. "He locked all Mom's photos in his office safe 4 years ago," she said, looking at her knees.
Tell me one thing you remember.
I'm starting to forget what her face looks like when she smiles.
She had a small freckle.
I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. I knew that exact feeling, the quiet panic of trying to remember someone you lost before their face fades into a blur. I walked over, sat down on the floor across from her and opened my sketchbook. We don't need the photos, I told her. Tell me one thing you remember about her face, just one. Soo-jin looked up, her fingers tapping her knee. She had a small freckle right near her left eye. All right, I said, touching charcoal to the paper. Let's start there. Sleeping on a real mattress that night felt wrong. It was too quiet. After 3 years on thin cafe benches, the silence of the estate felt heavy, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. I couldn't sleep, so I sat at the wooden desk near the window and pulled out my cracked phone. I scrolled past months of missed calls and unread messages from a contact saved simply as Mom. The last text from 6 months ago read, "Are you eating well? Call me when you get a moment." I hadn't replied. Years ago, my mother stood at the bus station with tears in her eyes and told me to chase my dream. I promised I'd come back as a real artist. I promised the sacrifices she'd made for me would mean something. Instead, I spent 3 years delivering fried chicken on a broken bicycle, sleeping in 24-hour manhwa cafes, and selling 15,000 sketches just to survive. I couldn't bring myself to pick up the phone. I was too proud to tell her I was failing and too ashamed to go home empty-handed. A quiet creak echoed from the doorway. Soo-jin was standing there in oversized pajamas, clutching a glass of water. She walked in on quiet feet and looked at the phone screen resting on the desk. "Is that your mom?" she asked, pointing at the contact name. "Yeah," I said softly, setting the phone face down. She pulled a stool over and sat beside me. "Why aren't you calling her?" I hesitated. "How do you explain adult pride to a 7-year-old? Because I promised her I'd come back when I achieved something big," I said, looking out at the dark courtyard. "And right now, I don't have anything to show for the years I spent away." Soo-jin stared at the face-down phone for a long moment. "My dad locked all my mom's pictures away," she said quietly. "I don't even get to hear her voice on the phone. If my mom called me, I wouldn't care if she had anything to give me. I just want her to answer." Her words hit me like a quiet punch to the chest. Simple, obvious, and totally undeniable. I looked at the little girl sitting beside me, carrying a quiet emptiness she didn't choose, while I was holding onto mine out of stubbornness. Soo-jin didn't say anything else. She leaned her head against my arm, her eyelids getting heavy, until her breathing slowed into a steady rhythm. Across the dark hallway, the light was on in the office. Kwon Du-hok was standing near the doorframe, watching us through the gap. He didn't interrupt, and he didn't step forward. But as he looked at his daughter fast asleep against my arm, the usual coldness in his face softened just a little. He knew what it was like to build walls out of pride. Soo-jin fell asleep with her head on my desk. As I carried her back to her room, she mumbled through a yawn, "Tomorrow, you have to teach me how to draw." I smiled, quietly making her a promise I intended to keep. The next morning, the mansion felt less like a fortress and more like a home, if only for an hour. Soo-jin had dragged me into the inner courtyard, her small face lighting up the moment she saw my portfolio had been returned to me. She didn't care about the guards standing at every exit or the heavy silence hanging over the estate. "You promised," she insisted, slamming a fresh sheet of paper onto the stone table. "You said you'd teach me how to draw hands." "The fingers always look like sausages when I do it." I laughed, kneeling beside her on the wooden deck. "Because you're drawing lines, not shapes. Look at your father's hands." Do-hyuk was standing under the shadow of the veranda, a tablet in hand, pretending to read corporate hotel reports, but his eyes kept drifting over to us. "See how his knuckles have sharp angles." I guided Soo-jin's pencil, my eyes locking with Do-hyuk's across the courtyard. "A hand tells you exactly what a person carries." His hands are heavy, they hold a lot of weight. Do-hyuk didn't look away this time. He slowly walked over, sitting across from us at the stone table. He placed his large, calloused hand flat on the wood. "And what do your hands hold, Roxy?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes drilling into my soul. I looked down at my own palms, scarred, rough from delivery handles and cold pavement, but steady. "Survival," I said simply. "And the patience to see things as they are." Soo-jin giggled, completely unaware of how her father was looking at me, or how fast my own heart had just started beating. She traced a clumsy line around his thumb. "Dad's hands are boring, draw Roxy's instead." Then, without looking up from the paper, she added, "You know what else is boring? I've never even seen where you work. Roxy hasn't either." She glanced sideways at me, the corner of her mouth curling in a way that told me this wasn't an accident. "Can we go?"
See how his knuckles have sharp angles?
Dad's hands are boring. I've never even seen where you work. Can we go? Just for the weekend?
Just for the weekend. Do-hyuk's hand went still on the table. "Soo-jin," she didn't look up from her drawing, which was admittedly a very lopsided attempt at my thumb. "It's just a hotel, you own it, it's not like we'd be sneaking in. It's not that simple. You always say that." She finally looked up, and there it was, the same stubborn tilt of her chin she'd had the very first day she planted herself on my stool. You said if I stopped asking about Mom's pictures for a whole month, you'd let me pick one thing. I picked this. I kept my eyes on the sketchbook, pretending very hard to be absorbed in shading a knuckle. This wasn't my fight to have. Do-hyuk exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound of a man doing math on a losing hand. The East Wing has guests this weekend. Investors, it's not a playground, Soo-jin. Then we'll stay in the part that isn't. She set her pencil down with the finality of someone closing an argument. I'm not asking to run around the lobby. I just want Roxy to see it. You're always telling me how hard you worked for it. I want to see the thing you worked hard for. That landed somewhere I don't think she meant it to. Do-hyuk's jaw tightened, and for a second the courtyard was very quiet except for a bird arguing with itself in the eaves. It's a lot of security to arrange for one weekend, he said, softer now, more thinking out loud than arguing, then arrange it. Soo-jin shrugged, like this was obviously his job and not a real obstacle. You arrange everything else. Bit back a laugh at that, badly enough that Do-hyuk caught it. You have an opinion, he said, looking at me. Have zero stake in this, I said, hands up. I sleep on a mattress you gave me. I go where the 9-year-old tells me to go. That's not an opinion, that's cowardice. He said, it's diplomacy. I replied. Soo-jin looked between us like she was watching a tennis match she'd already decided the outcome of. So is that a yes? Do-hyuk was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I wondered if he was actually going to say no. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to her. Be with her the whole time, he said to me. Not staff, not a nanny rotation. You. I wasn't planning on handing her off to room service. I mean it, Roxy. His eyes held mine, serious under the deflection. If something feels wrong, you leave the floor without waiting for permission. Understood. He turned back to Soo-jin, who had gone very still, sensing the verdict before it landed. One weekend, you stay with security in sight at all times, no wandering. Soo-jin's whole face lit up like she'd won a war, not a weekend. I promise. He looked at me then like he was only just remembering I was a separate person with a say in this. You don't have to agree to this. She already decided for both of us, I said, nodding at Soo-jin, who was too busy grinning at her drawing to notice she'd been caught. I'm just the artist she dragged along. Something in his expression loosened just slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to its neighborhood. Friday, then. Soo-jin let out a small, triumphant sound and immediately went back to drawing, as if she hadn't just out-negotiated a man who ran an empire for a living. If you've ever had a 9-year-old outmaneuver you at your own table, you know exactly what Do-hyuk was up against. Drop a comment below if you've lost an argument to a kid, hit like, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens the moment we walked through those hotel doors. For anyone who hasn't known my name from the start, my name is Roxy. And that weekend, walking into Kwon Do-hyuk's hotel on his daughter's orders, I had no idea I was about to notice something in that lobby that no ordinary artist should have been able to see. The Kwon Hyundai stood 31 floors over the water, all glass and quiet gold light. It was the kind of building that made you lower your voice before anyone told you to. Soo-jin didn't lower hers. She marched through the revolving doors like she owned the marble, waving at a bellhop who straightened up so fast he nearly dropped his luggage cart. That's Mr. Yoon, she whispered to me. He gave me extra mints last time. Don't tell my dad.
That's Mr. Yoon. He gave me extra mints last time. Don't tell my dad.
I was so amused by that statement. The lobby had that particular hush of expensive places, low voices, soft lighting, everyone moving like they were being watched even when they weren't. I felt completely out of place in a way Soo-jin clearly never had. We hadn't even reached the front desk when we heard the arguing. A guest, silver-haired, sharp-suited, the kind of man who'd clearly never been told no in his life, was leaning over the counter at a young staff member, his voice rising.
This is the third time your system has lost my reservation. Do you have any idea who stays in this hotel?
I am so sorry, sir.
Do you know what my business is worth here? The staff member, a young woman who couldn't have been older than 22, was stammering an apology that wasn't working, her hands shaking slightly over her keyboard. A small line of guests had started to form behind him, staring at the floor and pretending not to watch. I don't know what made me walk over. Soo-jin trailed half a step behind me, watching with wide eyes. Sir, excuse me, I said gently, stepping up beside him with an easy smile like I was just joining a conversation.
Sir, excuse me. I only asked because I know the owner. Nobody here can get it to work. Do you have anything on 26 or above? 28 is open.
Is the system locking you out of your usual room again? He turned, thrown off by the interruption. Excuse me, I only ask because I know the owner, I lied softly, leaning in with a conspiratorial look. And between us he complains about this computer system constantly. Nobody here can get it to work the way it's supposed to. That got the smallest crack of a laugh out of him despite himself. It's ridiculous. I book the exact same ocean suite every single quarter. That really is ridiculous, I agreed, and he could hear that I meant it. High floor. Away from the elevator noise, exactly that, us 1 second. I turned to the young woman behind the desk whose eyes were wide with a mix of panic and relief. Do you have anything on 26 or above Oceanside? Even if it's a different room, sometimes a new view is better than fighting a computer. She checked her screen quickly, her hands steadying. 28 is open. 28, I said to the man, giving him a small nod. Sounds like a solid upgrade. Minutes later, the man was walking toward the elevators with his keycard and considerably less anger in his shoulders. The young woman behind the desk let out a huge breath the moment he was gone. Thank you, she said quietly. He comes in every month and does that. Nobody's ever gotten him to calm down that fast. He's not really mad at you, I told her warmly. He's just stressed and used to fighting to get what he wants. You handled it fine. I didn't realize Do-hyuk had come up behind us until I turned around. He had been standing near the pillars long enough to see the whole thing, his arms loosely crossed, a strange, quiet look on his face. You do that often? He asked, his voice low. Handle men twice your age who think they own the room. Only the ones who are making life hard for people just trying to do their job. I shrugged. People aren't that complicated once you stop taking their anger personally. He was quiet for a long moment, watching me. Soo-jin was right about you. About what? You notice people, he said simply, like a fact he was only now realizing out loud. It's rare in a building full of staff paid to just nod and smile. Soo-jin, thoroughly entertained by the whole scene, grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward the elevators before I had to figure out how to reply to that. The suite was absurd, floor-to-ceiling windows over Hyundai Beach, a piano no one played, more space than Soo-jin and I had shared in the annex 3 times over. She threw herself onto the largest couch immediately and declared it the drawing couch before I'd even set my bag down. For the rest of the afternoon, it was easy in a way that surprised me. Soo-jin ordered 3 kinds of juice from room service just to see if she could. I ended up trading jokes with 2 different staff members who kept finding reasons to stop by, one about the piano nobody played, one about whether the 10th floor really did have a ghost, according to housekeeping legend. By dinner, half the floor staff knew my name. Been here 6 hours, Do-hyuk said, watching me laugh with a bellhop over something Soo-jin had said about the elevator music. And you already know more people than I do, and I own the building. You intimidate people into silence, I said. I asked them what their day's been like, different approach, clearly the more effective one. That evening after Soo-jin had finally worn herself out at the pool and gone to bed early, I stepped out onto the suite's balcony for air. The city spread out gold and quiet below. I didn't hear Do-hyuk come out until he was already beside me. Good with people in a way I've never learned to be, he said without preamble. I used to think it was a weakness. Watching you today, I'm less sure. It's not a skill, really. I just like people. Most of them are just tired and want someone to notice. People don't get noticed by someone who also spent 3 years sleeping in a manhwa cafe. I looked at him sideways. Is that supposed to be an insult? I stammered because he just reminded me of my sorrows. It's supposed to be the opposite.
You're good with people in a way I've
He turned to
never learned
face me
be.
properly.
Watching you today, I'm less
You've had
sure.
every reason to stop being kind to strangers a long time ago.
I just like
You didn't.
people.
I don't know many people who'd have come out the other side of what you went through still choosing to be like that. I didn't have a ready answer for that, which was rare for me. He reached out, not fast, not deliberate, just his hand finding the railing near mine, his fingers brushing against my knuckles. I should have moved. I'd had 3 years of practice moving away from anything that asked something of me. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, and when he turned to say something else, whatever it was died somewhere between his mouth and mine. The kiss wasn't planned by either of us. That was the only reason it happened at all. Neither of us had built a wall specifically against something neither of us saw coming. His hand came up to my jaw, careful, like he expected me to bolt. I didn't, not at first. For one full, unguarded moment, I let myself have exactly what it was. Then I heard myself think about my mother's unanswered texts, about 3 years of never letting anyone close enough to leave a mark when they left, and I stepped back so fast I nearly knocked over a plant stand. I shouldn't have, I said at the same moment he said. I didn't mean to. We both stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any argument would have been. I should check on Soo-jin, I said, and went inside before he could answer, my chest tight with something I didn't have a clean name for. I spent the rest of that night wide awake on the drawing couch, furious at myself for wanting to go back out onto that balcony and knowing exactly why I wouldn't. I avoided him for most of the drive back to the estate, which was easier than it should have been, since Soo-jin filled every silence with an exhaustive review of the hotel pool's diving board. It wasn't avoidance he noticed first. It was the way I went quiet around him, specifically warm with everyone else, careful with him. By the third day, even Sujin picked up on it. Being weird with my dad, she said, blunt as ever, while I was helping her shade in a drawing of the estate's koi pond. You talk to everyone else like they're your best friend. You talk to him like he's a stranger. Don't mean to. Then why do you do it? I set my charcoal down. 9 years old, and she'd found the exact question I'd been avoiding since the balcony. Because it's easier, I said finally, to keep some distance with the people who could actually hurt you than to let them all the way in and find out what happens after. She considered that with the terrible seriousness only children manage. My mom left, that hurt a lot, but I don't think not loving people again would have hurt less. I think it just would have hurt different. I didn't have an answer for a 9-year-old out-treasoning me on my own emotional dilemma, so I didn't try to give one. I just kept shading in the koi pond and let what she'd said sit somewhere it could actually do some good. That evening, Do-hyuk found me in the annex doorway, the way he had that first quiet night weeks ago. Been somewhere else since the hotel, he said. I'd rather you just say it than watch you build a wall in real time. I'm not good at this part, I admitted. The part after. I've spent 3 years making sure nobody got close enough that it would cost anything when they left. You did anyway. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not asking you to have an answer tonight. He leaned against the doorframe, giving me the space I clearly needed. I'm asking you not to disappear into politeness every time it gets uncomfortable. Sujin's noticed, so have I. I know. That's all I wanted to say. He didn't push further and didn't reach for me again. I just let it sit there, honest and unresolved, and went back inside. I stood in that door entrance a long time after he'd gone, thinking about unanswered texts and a 9-year-old's uncomplicated logic, and how long I'd been mistaking distance for safety. Some of us are so much better at taking care of everyone else except ourselves. If you've ever built those same walls around your own heart, let me know I'm not the only one in the comments below. We'll pick up right here during what happened next. I didn't call Do-hyuk back that night. I called my mother instead. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice holding that careful, hesitant tone she always used when she wasn't sure if I was going to hang up. Roxy, hi Mom. My throat tightened up instantly. I'm sorry for all of it, the missed calls, the 3 years. The line went completely quiet. For a second I thought the call had dropped. Been waiting 3 years to hear your voice say that, she said, her voice breaking. She tried to hide that she was crying, but she couldn't. We talked for almost an hour. It wasn't a dramatic conversation that fixed everything overnight, but it was a start. The slow, quiet work of 2 people putting down their pride. For the first time in years, I stopped hiding behind my walls, and it didn't destroy me like I thought it would. When I hung up, I stepped out onto the annex porch to catch my breath. Do-hyuk was standing at the bottom of the steps, waiting quietly in the dark so I wouldn't have to face the silence alone. Good call, he asked gently, an overdue one. I wiped my cheeks, not caring that he saw the tears. You were right about the wall. He walked up the steps slowly, stopping right in front of me. I didn't want to be right, Roxy. I just didn't want you pulling away from people who care about you. I wasn't pulling away because of you, I said, looking directly into his eyes. I was doing it out of habit. You were just the first person brave enough to call me out on it. Something shifted in his expression. The last layer of reserve he always kept hidden behind his eyes completely vanished. He reached out, his hand cupping the side of my face, his thumb softly brushing tears off my skin. This time I didn't step back. I didn't freeze. I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes for a single second just to feel the warmth of his palm. When his lips met mine, it wasn't the sudden, frantic mistake from the balcony. It was deep, slow, and heavy with everything we'd been holding back for weeks. My hands went up to his chest, feeling the hard, steady rhythm of his heart beneath my fingers, pulling him closer until there wasn't an inch of space left between us. He let out a quiet breath against my mouth, his arms wrapping around my waist as if he were making sure I was real, making sure I wasn't going to vanish the moment things got honest. Roxy, he whispered against my lips, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. Are you sure about this? Instead of answering with words, I took his hand, stepped backward into the annex and pulled him inside with me, letting the door close quietly against the night. For 3 years, I had believed that staying alone was the only way to protect myself from getting hurt. But that night, lying in the quiet dark of the annex with Do-hyuk, feeling his hands on my skin and his chest rising against mine, I realized how much of my life I had given up just to stay safe. We didn't rush. There were no walls left between us, no corporate titles, no ghosts from the past, just 2 tired people finally letting themselves be held by someone who understood the weight they'd been carrying alone. The morning came slowly, soft sunlight filtering through the thin curtains of the annex. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't wake up feeling like I had to brace myself against the world. Do-hyuk was already awake, leaning on one elbow, watching me with that quiet, steady focus that used to make me nervous, only now it just felt warm. Quiet, I whispered, reaching out to trace the sharp line of his jaw. Just realizing how much time we wasted trying to be smart, he said, his voice low and heavy with sleep. He leaned down, pressing a slow, gentle kiss to my shoulder before pulling the blanket up around us. But when he finally got dressed and walked across the courtyard to his morning meetings, he didn't rush out like a man hiding a mistake. He walked slowly, looking back once at the annex doorway with a soft, unhurried smile. We didn't announce anything. We didn't have to. Soo-jin figured it out within a week, the way children figure out everything adults think they're hiding, not through anything either of us said, but through the small things that changed. Do-hyuk stopped pretending he had estate business as an excuse to walk past the annex twice a day. I stopped putting distance in my voice when I talked to him in front of her. Are you and my dad together now? Soo-jin asked one warm afternoon as she scattered another handful of fish food into the koi pond. She didn't even look at me, completely absorbed in watching dozens of brightly coloured koi rush toward the bridge. We're figuring it out, I said honestly. Okay, she tossed a few more pellets into the water, smiling as the largest koi nudged the others aside. Satisfied, like she'd confirmed something practical rather than something enormous, and sprinkled the last of the fish food into the pond. It was 3 days later that the call came. I almost didn't pick up, a number I hadn't saved, calling from a city I hadn't lived in for years. It was a neighbour of my mother's, her voice careful in the way people get right before they say something they don't want to say. My mother had collapsed at the market. Nothing fatal, the neighbour said quickly, seeing me brace for the worst through the phone. But her heart wasn't what it used to be, and the doctors demanded that she needs someone to assist her because she needs someone there and can't keep living alone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the annex steps until Do-hyuk found me there before dawn, the way he always seemed to. My mother, I said before he could ask. She's not doing well, I have to go back. He didn't say anything for a long moment, then quietly, for how long? I don't know yet. That was the honest answer, and it cost me something to give it to him plainly instead of softening it. She needs someone there. I spent 3 years too proud to call her. I'm not going to spend the years she has left the same way. Not going to ask you not to go. His jaw was tight, but his voice stayed even. I'm asking you to tell me the truth about what this is. Is this a visit or a final departure? I don't know that either, I admitted. I want it to be a visit. I don't know yet if it can be. Soo-jin cried the morning I left, not the dramatic, easily soothed tears of a child losing a toy, but the quiet, furious kind that comes from a 9-year-old who has already had her heart broken once, and knows exactly what it feels like when someone she loves and has filled the space of a mother in her life walks out of the door.
You promised me you would always call on Fridays.
I know.
You're leaving anyway.
That's a promise too. I'm gonna call you every single one of those days.
You promised me you would always call on Fridays, she said, arms crossed so tightly her knuckles had gone through pale. I know. You're leaving anyway. I'm going to call you every single one of those days, I said, crouching to her eye level. That's not nothing, Soo-jin. That's a promise too, just a different shape. She didn't answer. She hugged me hard enough to bruise and didn't let go for a long time. Do-hyuk drove me to the airport himself. He didn't fill the silence with anything performative. At the gate, he just held my face in both hands the way he had that first night on the balcony, except there was nothing accidental in it this time. Call when you land, he said. Not because I need you to, because I'll worry if you don't. I will, Roxy. He hesitated, which wasn't like him. Whatever this turns out to be, a visit or something longer, I'm not going to pretend I'm fine with either outcome equally. I'd rather you know that than have me perform patience I don't actually feel. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Had a good teacher in honesty lately. I kissed him once, quick and unfinished, the kind of kiss that doesn't try to be an ending, and walked through security without letting myself look back, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't get on the plane at all. The first few weeks back home were harder than I let on in either direction. My mother was smaller than I remembered, more fragile but sharper-tongued than ever about how long it had taken me to come home. We fought exactly once about the 3 years of silence, and then didn't fight about it again, because we'd both said the thing that needed saying. I called Soo-jin every Friday, exactly as promised. She'd hold the phone up to whatever she was drawing that week, narrating every line. Do-hyuk and I talked most nights. Never long, never enough, always ending a beat before either of us was ready to hang up. Neither of us hung up first for almost a full minute after that. But while we were whispering across phone lines trying to stay brave, 300 miles away in Seoul, the quiet was already starting to break the people I'd left behind. Ms. Han had taught third grade long enough to know the difference between a quiet child and a child who had gone quiet. Soo-jin used to be the first hand up in the room, sometimes before the question had even finished being asked. Lately, she sat with her hand in her lap and her eyes on the window, answering only when called on directly, and even then in the smallest possible number of words. It was the drawings that worried Ms. Han most. Soo-jin had always been the class's brightest colorist, indifferent to staying inside the lines but generous with every shade she reached for: pink skis, purple rivers, a sun that was sometimes green just because she liked it better that way. In the last 2 weeks, her drawings had gone almost entirely grey. A house, a tree, a woman's outline by a river, sketched in dark pencil and never once coloured in, as though Soo-jin couldn't decide what shade the memory was supposed to be. "Is everything all right at home?" Ms. Han asked gently, crouching beside her desk during free period. Soo-jin shrugged, the particular shrug of a child performing fine because actual honesty felt too large to manage in a classroom. "My dad's busy." "Roxy's visiting her mom." "That sounds hard." "It's fine." She said it the way adults say it, flat and closed, and went back to the ungraded lines of her sketch, the pencil pressing harder into the paper than it needed to. Ms. Han watched her for a moment longer before stepping away, realizing the heavy silence in that 9-year-old's heart was only half of a much bigger shadow hanging over the estate. 3 miles away in the top-floor executive suite of Kwon Holdings, that same silence was slowly taking over. The quarterly board meeting ran long, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was Kwon Do-hyuk's silence through most of it. Chairman, one of the senior directors, a man who'd worked under Do-hyuk for 11 years and had never once needed to repeat a question, tried again. "The Hyundai renovation budget. Do you approve the revised figure, or would you like it adjusted?" Do-hyuk's eyes had drifted to the window somewhere in the last several minutes, fixed on nothing in particular. It took a full 3 seconds, long enough for 2 junior staff to exchange a glance across the table, before he registered the question had been asked at all. "Approved," he said, though his tone suggested he hadn't fully absorbed which figure he was approving. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. His assistant lingered by the door after the room had cleared. "Chairman, you've asked me to repeat things 3 times this week. That's not like you. I'm aware. Should I clear your evening?" He looked at his phone instead of answering. "No message waiting, not at this hour, not yet." "No, just reschedule tomorrow's morning calls an hour later." "Of course." She hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, sir." The staff have noticed, not in a way anyone's speaking of unkindly, just noticed. He didn't ask what they'd noticed. He already knew. A man used to commanding a room without raising his voice had spent the better part of 2 months distracted by the sound of a phone that hadn't rung yet. That night he sat on the annex steps out of habit, though there was no one inside to find him there anymore, staring out into the dark courtyard until his phone finally lit up in his hand. He didn't hesitate. He picked up on the very first ring, breathing in the quiet sound of her voice from 300 miles away. Every time I hear his voice on the other end of the line, I can feel the weight of everything we aren't saying. It's been 2 months now. My mother is stronger than she was, though the doctors still use words like ongoing care and not alone, and I'm not the kind of person who can walk away from that a second time and live with myself for it. I don't need anyone to spell out what's happening 300 miles away in Seoul. I can feel the weight of it carrying through the receiver during our Friday calls. I hear it in the heavy, careful pauses when Soo-jin describes her school drawings. I hear it in the tired edge of Do-hyuk's voice when he tells me the estate is quiet. They don't complain and they don't ask me to choose, which somehow makes the distance hurt so much more. I don't have a clean ending yet. I'm not sure this is the kind of story that gets won easily. Every choice feels like breaking a promise to someone I love. I sit by my mother's window at night with my phone resting in my lap, looking out at the dark hills of my hometown, still trying to figure out how a person is supposed to belong to 2 homes at once. All I know is this: distance only works when people agree to grow apart. And neither Do-hyuk nor Soo-jin nor I have given up on each other yet. Some Friday very soon, one of us is going to stop being patient about the miles between us. I just don't know yet which one of us is going to break first, or what happens the moment that phone rings and we finally decide to stop waiting.